Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, joined today by Jordan Edwards of our football scouting department. Jordan, what's going on?
What's going on, Matt? Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are into our off-season post-draft schedule, which means we're going every other week for now and for the next couple of months until we circle back and get closer to the 2022 season. We've got our producer, Justin Stein, here with us as always. If you're missing Mark Simon, I highly suggest you go check him out over on the Sports Info Solutions Baseball Podcast. He's got Tony Gwynn Jr. and Bobby Scales on this week. Really exciting stuff over there. And of course, if you're basketball-minded, don't miss the SIS Hoops Playing in Space podcast hosted by Henry Ward. But for today, we are here to talk about football, and we are here to talk about offensive line, the big nasties. That's why we got our expert, Jordan Edwards, in here. Jordan, let's start with it right off the top. Who are you taking in a fight between Nick Saban? You know where I'm going with this?
I know. I've been looking at the news lately.
I think this is so funny. I think I like Jimbo Fisher kind of in that fight. Saban's small in person.
You know, attitude-wise, I'm going Saban all day. I think he's a little bit more. I mean, he's throwing a little bit of shade out there. I think he's pissed off Saban. It might be the scariest guy in college football, but I mean, when you come out,
make an NFL player cry. I remember in like training camp at one point.
I mean, when you come out and criticize and almost throw shame towards one of your former assistants and a guy who's been killing it on recruiting, and you basically come out here and shame him for beating you one-on-one. What Jimbo's been coming out and saying, I think you have to defend yourself. Jimbo's not throwing the punch, but he can give it back right now. So
I think we got to get Vince McMahon involved and see if we can really make the right kind of show out of this, because this is like, yeah.
Hey, I got to give it A&M. They're beating them. I mean, there's none of these guidelines on NIL. I know all that stuff is kind of a lot of question marks. So if there's no guidelines for it, you do what you can with it. Try and beat everybody. Saban thinks that he
play within the rules, and there are no rules.
There are no rules, so can't blame him.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think probably from a system level, there needs to be something addressed there. But anyway, let's talk about the real offensive linemen, though. We're here to talk about NFL offensive lines today. We're here to talk about the best offensive lines, the worst offensive lines, some of the key additions and losses, and some of the under radar offensive lines. What's good about this, for everybody out there, is it's really easy to think about all the fantasy additions and everybody's having all their drafts and things like that. But when it really comes down to it, a lot of the performance of the players on the field is all within the context of the offensive lines. It's the old Don Shula. You show me a good offensive line, I'll show you a good offense. So want to get into that, want to break down some of the transactions. So let's start off. Let's start off with that top 5 list, Jordan. Who do you got? What's our number 5 offensive line in terms of total points, and how do you break them down?
So number 5 coming in is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. Really, they were consistent across the entire board. So Lane Johnson comes in and a top 10 and being at his position at offensive tackle for total points. Jason Kelsey, the veteran, the leader of the offensive line, he comes in the top 10 for centers as well. But I think the biggest thing coming into it, last year they were able to run the ball really well towards the end of the season. That was really kind of their mainstay. But all 5 starters are returning for next year. And I think the biggest thing that, analytics doesn't, kind of entail is, continuity. Offensive line, it's more about the connectivity between all 5 players. And so when you can return all 5 offensive linemen, and I think with the second-year coach coming in, you have Jalen Hurts still there. You put the offensive playmakers around. The offensive line is really what's going to make the offense and the whole team really just kind of give itself a jolt. So you got guys like Landon Dickerson, who really played well his rookie year last year, and at left tackle, his name is escaping me. I mean, Mailata is the left tackle. He played really well last year. They gave him a pretty big deal recently. So the whole offensive line there for Philadelphia is really what's going to make this team, I think, possibly compete and win that division next year.
Yeah, I like that you bring up kind of like they're kind of exciting when you look at Landon Dickerson fitting into there. And then now they're also building further in the offseason as they look ahead. Look, in the second round pick, they picked Cam Jurgens, not the guy that we're the highest on in the draft, but you certainly get what they're doing there when you look at what Jason Kelsey has been, the athletic upside of Cam Jurgens, with this being somebody that maybe isn't the most polished player right now, but somebody, if there's anybody who you would look at in this class and see kind of that Jason Kelsey path for, I think it would be that. So it's sort of interesting there. I was actually on the Birds 365 show, and they were asking me about that move. And is it too much like a trap? Like, because we've seen Kelsey succeed here, are we looking too hard to find somebody to fit into that archetype instead of just getting the best player that we could? You know, like with the Ravens, just getting Linderbaum, who I think is more ready-made. I think we would agree on that one. So they certainly hit it out the park with Dickerson last year. This is a team that, when you look at their depth chart on the offensive line and the defensive line, they're really strong. And yet their first two picks, offensive line or defensive line and offensive line. So like, there's a reason why they're built that way. They're consistent with what they do.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I think I'm always a big proponent of replenishing the offensive defensive line. Those guys are the ones that kind of wear and tear, it builds up on them. And so, if you have multiple bodies to be able to play, especially on the defensive line, I love the Jordan Davis pick, because you've got your veterans and everything like that, but adding him in just adds more depth and playmaking, and can really let the guys behind them. They're not, super great at the linebacker position, but if they're having free lanes to run and you got Jordan Davis clearing pass for them, I think it's a great pick for them as well.
Yeah, and you look, I mean, Kaiser White should be a huge addition for them on that side of the ball. And Nakobe Dean, who they pick right after Jordan Davis. If any of his success was because of Jordan Davis, well, we're not really going to be able to tell the difference because they're still together.
Yep.
It should be interesting there. Love that number 5 O-line. You broke down too some of the top players on each of these top O-lines. They're kind of interesting because there's nobody that's like within the top 5 for their individual position, but as a whole, they are in the top 5.
Yeah, I think the continuity between all 5 spots, it kind of speaks more to when the whole group is playing well together, then I think the whole offense is playing well together. And so that's why they're going to stand out in our top 5.
Right. And what do you have? Lane Johnson, I think offensive line number 10, offensive tackle number 10 by total points.
Yep. And then Kelsey comes in at center 8. So a little bit lower, maybe, just off of the perception of who Kelsey is, but still he was very productive, late in his career.
Absolutely. All right. 5 strong offensive linemen, nobody jumping out. What about our number 4 offensive line by total points? Who do we have there?
Yeah, so it's going to be the New England Patriots, and kind of just like the Eagles, where nobody really stands out across the board over another. They still got some notable guys, Trent Brown, David Andrews, guys like that. They did trade away Shaq Mason this year to the Bucs. We'll get to them later. And then I think the biggest surprise of the first night of the draft, I want to say surprise, but definitely, the Strange pick, Cole Strange, obviously coming in at the first round to replace Shaq Mason. And so their whole offensive line, you guys, they went at left tackle, Winu at left guard, Andrews at center, probably going to plug in Strange at right guard with Trent Brown. And so the Patriots have always had good offensive lines, just the last handful of years, even when they haven't been winning games without Tom Brady and everything, they're still making the playoffs. And it's really due to the offensive line. They run the ball exceptionally well. They know they have an identity of what they want to be. And so drafting Cole Strange in the first round is good with me, because if he's going to play from day one and you're going to buy into that, then I have no problem with it.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get caught up in positional value, but when you get starters and they play for you, it's hard to argue with the way Bill Belichick has built his offensive lines over the years. I do think it's kind of interesting. Like, we're saying number 4 in total points based on last year, correct?
Yes. Yep.
So a couple of departures on the offensive line. You mentioned Shaq Mason, Ted Karras also out of town. They do draft Strange. Just on the smell test, I would take the Eagles offensive line ahead of the Patriots offensive line. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's definitely it's weird kind of how it works. They don't necessarily have the big time names, but obviously Trent Brown has been a good right tackle for a while. I think left tackle is still somewhere that needs to be improved. I think Wynn can probably play a little bit better. And then so we'll see with the interior, but when you're not having the Patriots, obviously they don't throw the ball a lot. They held the reins back from Mac Jones a little bit, who still played well. They obviously went to the playoffs, but when you have the identity of being a run first team like this, I think it masks some of the deficiencies that you might have as an entire offensive line group. And when you can get these guys just running downhill, I think it's why their total points kind of speaks for itself.
They promise to be super right-handed kind of on offense. When you look at Trent Brown and Cole Strange, how he fits in there, we'll see how that plays out. All right, they're number 4. Again, a team with no real standout top. You talk about Trent Brown, probably the guy that you would look at there, but nobody that really jumps out to the top of the leaderboard. Same thing with the Eagles. So let's see if that stays the same. Moving to our number 3 team, the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, so the Chiefs, rewind 2 years ago, into that Super Bowl with the Bucks. Obviously, JPP and Shaq Barrett, they went to town on that offensive line, and they made it a priority to try and fix. They go out and they trade for Orlando Brown, back into the first round type of pick. They get in here in the third. I think it was second or third round last year. They draft Creed Humphrey, who was our number 3 center, across all offensive linemen at the position as a rookie. And so Joe Thuney was our offensive guard 1. They went out and gave him a big deal in the offseason, last offseason as well. Then they get probably this, value-wise, one of the steals of the draft in the 6th round with Trey Smith, who slipped just due to some medical concerns. The right tackle, Lucas Niang, was almost like a red shirt. They drafted him 2 years ago. We played in right tackle. And so he got injured a little late in the season last year, but they're going to return all 5 starters on the offensive line. And so just kind of like how the Eagles were, their offensive line is going to make them, move throughout the season. They're going to protect Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs were obviously, very good at running the ball last year with this offensive line. As long as they can kind of do that and kind of spell having to throw the ball 40, 50 times with that offense, they're going to be able to still win games. And so Creed Humphrey is, going to be one of the best centers in the league. Thuney has always been one of the best guards. And I think kind of just developing this whole group together is why, I think going into next year, they could be the best offensive line when the season comes to an end.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just looking at the way that offensive line was rebuilt really in 1 year. You mentioned Yang. It was kind of like cheating because he was stashed there in the background over that time. But literally, they changed over all 5 positions, and they became one of the best offensive lines in the league. I think really Joe Thuney was one of the acquisitions of the year last year. I mean, yep. He's just been so unbelievable for them, and it makes sense. They would get him from the Patriots, who we just talked about being kind of right-handed, being a run-first team. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we look at the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes as a pass-first team, and this is a very left-handed offensive line, right? You talk about Orlando Brown. They took a risk making that trade for him, and he showed that Orlando that he can be a left tackle in this league and be a high-level performer at that position. Put him next to Joe Thuney, just help make sure that he's going to be successful there. They locked that down, and then you mentioned Creed Humphrey was an absolute stud as a rookie. He was one of the top centers in the league, and then they get Trey Smith later in the draft along with that. It really is building into an offensive line that you look for the next 3 years and you say, how does this not work? Like, what are we missing here? Niang being kind of like the only, I would say, question mark at this point on the line, but I think they've got a plan there too. So,
and I think if you look at all these guys, going back to even when they were in college and thinking about when Orlando Brown was with Baltimore and Thuney when he was in with the Patriots, all these guys are good pullers. And if you look at their gap run scheme, with their EPA rank is 5th in the league, and they don't even do it a lot. And so, but the fact that they're doing it at a high level without doing it as much, I think it kind of speaks to kind of the identity of what this offensive line can be. And so I'm interested to see if they lean a little bit more on that, get those guys kind of out in space. Orlando Brown was awesome with the Ravens in their offensive line when he was pulling around and doing stuff like that. And so I think getting these guys on the move, clearing out space for whoever they put at running back, because it seems like they can really just put anybody back there and be able to thrive at that position. So, I think that's something I'm looking forward to kind of going into the season is how different does this offensive line and this offensive scheme look going into next year?
I like that. That's a great shout. I would love to see some of that because in one sense, they're a fun team, using a lot of motion, using it really well. Obviously, they tend to be in shotgun like most teams in the league at this point, but they do it even more than average. But that's a really good thing to point out that they are zone heavy team in terms of what they call in the run game, but they were much better performing in the gap game last year. And that does match some of the talent that they have there. Like you said, getting Orlando Brown on the move, Thuney coming from the Patriots scheme where he's obviously been doing a lot of that in his career. Creed Humphrey, getting him on the move. Yeah. Like there's some exciting stuff that you could do there.
Yeah. People movers. I mean, that's what they are. So
you got to love it. All right, let's get to the top 2. Both of the top 2 offensive lines by total points also are 2 of the biggest movers that would have been mentioned in the key losses and additions section. So really interesting to see what they were and if they can remain what they were going forward next year. But who do you got, Jordan? Who was our number 2 offensive line by total points last year?
Yeah, so number 2 is going to be the Los Angeles Rams, the Super Bowl champions. Andrew Whitworth put together an awesome career playing with the Bengals and the Rams in his career. He came in at offensive tackle number 2 and for the whole positional rank. They're going to lose him to retirement. And then you also lose Austin Corbett, who was a really good kind of find for them. I believe they traded for him a couple years ago, and he's been a really good right guard for them. They lose him in free agency to Carolina. I think the big thing with the Rams is they were going to lose a lot of people coming into this offseason. One of the first moves that they did was they re-signed kind of their sixth offensive lineman, Joe Noteboom. It sounds like they're going to play him at left tackle opposite of Havenstein at right. And so I think, having that trust in him, I think they're confident with him being a left tackle. So that's why they didn't necessarily go out and look at somebody else in free agency to bring in. And then their first pick in the draft this year came in the third round, and that was Logan Bruss out of Wisconsin. And probably they're going to put him at one of those guard spots that they ended up losing. And so this is kind of the first, offensive line that we're talking about that's going to have a lot of, musical chairs, kind of who's going to play where, who's replacing who. And the Rams, they built their success on that offensive line with Whitworth being, and Havenstein at this kind of the stalwarts on the ends there at tackles. And so I'm interested to see what they do going into next year and how this offensive line looks.
Yeah. It's interesting in a few ways. Oftentimes we think about associating the run game with offensive line and the pass game, with receivers and skill players. This is an offensive line that was built for the pass game. This was an offensive line that led a team that was one of the best passing and receiving teams in the NFL and really did nothing from a running the football perspective last year, other than, just keep it a little bit balanced as much as they could to keeping the defense honest. So that's one interesting thing that I look at is the way that they were built, but then going into what they were compared to what they're going to have to do this year. I mean, you mentioned both of the departures. Whitworth, one of the best tackles in the league. I think he was the second by total points last year. Austin Corbett, losing him to free agency as well. Yes, they add Bruss, the third rounder. They slide Joe Noteboom probably into that left tackle spot. It'll be interesting to see how much of the success of this offensive line is really attributable to the scheme and kind of what Sean McVay is able to do and the sort of balance that they're able to create with the outside zone game, which they're so prone to. But then I just really worry about, I don't think it was just that. I think there's also, they had some players and they're going to have to really figure out how to get past that if they want to make another run at this thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things, going back the last few years before the Rams made that trade for Matt Stafford, play action was something that they loved doing. Last year, they were number one EPA ranked team in play action. They had a lot of success of it, but they did less of it because they had Matt Stafford and they were able to do some more drop back game and stuff like that with that offensive line. So I think when you kind of move away from some of these veterans and you're playing with a new offensive line, do they get back into that play action, move the pocket a little bit more? Those McVay and Shanahan offenses where everything kind of looks the same with the play action and the flow of how the play looks. And so maybe they do a little bit more of that, this year, just kind of based off of who they have. And so I'm interested to see that next year. How does McVay kind of spell with how these offensive linemen, how they look next year?
It'll be interesting to see, because does he go back to kind of the roots and fixing that zone run game that 80% of the time they're running zone scheme plays, but they were at negative 0.12 EPA per play last year. That was 18th in the NFL in terms of efficiency on zone carries last year. So now that was offset. They won the Super Bowl because they were first in efficiency on deep drops, like you mentioned, and they were running deep drops 38% of the time, which is pretty hefty. They also were great against man coverage. They were great when they used play action, but again, not able to use the play action as much, probably because they weren't having the same amount of success with that zone run game. So they had to pick their spots a little bit more in terms of how they do that. It'll be fascinating because I don't think they have sort of the sort of talent just up front that they had that to sort of be able to absorb some different things and some different looks. There might be some rebuilding that goes on there, and I wouldn't be surprised if, like you said, they went back to kind of some of those more tried and true concepts that the whole Shanahan coaching tree is really comfortable with.
Yeah, for sure. No, I completely agree.
Number one team in terms of total points last year. We said the number two team was the Super Bowl champions. Who was the number one team?
The number one team is going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Number one in our total points for the position, the offensive line as a whole. Tristan Wirfs is going to come in, the second-year player, as our OT1 total points for the position. Donovan Smith, the left tackle, is going to come in at OT4. and Ryan Jensen's going to come in as the top center in total points. So when you have three players in the top five at their respective positions, and two of them at being the best, you're gonna have a pretty big wide margin on the number one spot. And so I think the biggest thing with this is obviously you've got Tom Brady coming back. The offensive line is going to look a lot different with Ali Marpet and Alex Kappa leaving. Marpet with the early retirement and Kappa leaving in free agency to the Bengals. They went out and they traded for Shaq Mason, a guy that we kind of mentioned with the Patriots a few minutes ago, and they add with their second round pick Luke Gadecki out of Central Michigan. And so it seems like those two are going to be the guys that they kind of plug and play and kind of run it back with everything. And so I think the key to the Buccaneers team, like we said, obviously they have Tom Brady, but with Tom Brady's age is the less mobility that he's able to kind of go with. This offensive line is something that is critical to their success. And so last year when they were playing the Rams, Tristan Wirfs had a couple, had an ankle injury, and so he wasn't playing very well. That kind of allowed Aaron Donald and Von Miller to kind of turn loose, and they were able to create a lot of pressure in that crazy game. And so I think the Bucs are obviously going to be one of the top teams, not only in the NFC, but in the NFL, and the offensive line is really kind of where it starts for them.
So Tom Brady tried to become an executive with the Dolphins, but when he saw the Bucs lose both of their very good starting guards from last year, he went out and made a trade for Shaq Mason on the Bucs behalf, right? So you talk about a right-handed offensive line here now because, like you mentioned before, Tristan Wirfs, as good as they come at right tackle in the league, put Shaq Mason next to him and between him and Ryan Jensen there. You feel pretty good about that. I would say less so. We'll see what Gadecki is on the NFL level. And Donovan Smith, one of the most interesting careers, like very quietly, he's had a really good career. But I mean, you talk about somebody, when he came out of Penn State, I thought he was going to be stud, one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. You could put him basically at any offensive line position and he'd be amazing there. He's kind of been okay. Like for his first contract, I think he was kind of subpar a lot of the time, managed to get the second contract, and he's been, good enough to win the Super Bowl with, and they've been happy with him there for sure. But still somebody who I think doesn't really inspire the sort of Tristan Wirfs level of confidence. Great season last year, but now when you look at who's going to be next to him at left guard, I think we could have a recipe for some frustrated Tom Brady here. He knows how important having those guards set that pocket for him are. He knows how good that offensive line's been in the past and how that plays into his success at 4,400 years old. But filled in the right guard hole next to the great right tackle. I wonder on the left side if Donovan Smith shows a little bit more of sort of the chinks in the armor, not having his old buddy next to him anymore, who's enjoying his retirement.
I'm very curious to see kind of how this offensive line kind of shapes up because, you look at them, we were talking about kind of the drop back percentage. They were the number one percentage team with dropbacks with Tom Brady, and they were last in play action. So that's not something that they do. Going back to kind of New England, Tom Brady, they love that play action. And so really being able to do that drop back stuff, it really kind of depends on that offensive line. Just like you said, if that left side, his blind side, is not going to be able to do that at the level that they have been the last couple of years, I think it's definitely going to affect what they do on the offensive side of the ball. And so with Byron Leftwich taking that kind of next step and being the play caller, I'm interested to see what they do, how they get Chris Godwin back in the fold. They made some other moves at receivers and stuff like that. And so maybe they spread it out a little bit more. We don't know what Gronk is going to end up doing. Probably he'll end up coming back. I would assume so, but
second half of the season,
he's not on the team yet. So
not before training camp. No way.
Yeah, no way. Yeah. So I'm interested to see kind of what the identity of this offense is, especially with they re-signed Leonard Fournette as well. So, but yeah, the offensive line, like you said, that right side is definitely going to be kind of the bread and butter of that whole group. And so I'm interested to see. Like you said, Donovan Smith, he's kind of been shaky in his career, but he had a great year last year.
It'll be fascinating to see. Like you mentioned, they were all drop back, no play action, a lot of short drop backs last year too. Very much the Tom Brady get the ball out of the hands quick offense that kind of we saw in the middle of his career at this point. So pretty interesting when we look at that top five list. Going back over it, was the Eagles at number 5, Patriots at 4, Chiefs at 3, Rams at 2, Bucks at 1. But with all the changes on the Bucks and the Rams, probably a little bit more questions there. And when we really look at the depth chart, the Chiefs and the Eagles really stand out from the eye test in terms of offensive lines that you'd feel great about.
Yeah. I think those two coming in, having that continuity between all 5 players, I think is really one of the biggest things I think that you can't undersell for an entire offensive line unit.
No doubt about it. All right, let's flip ahead and let's talk about some of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. Instead of giving you all five, we're just going to give you the bottom four this time. So let's look at this. We're doing this by total points, not by being just haters. But I think, again, just kind of like the top five list, I think it does match reality. So who do we got? Who was the fourth worst offensive line in total points last year?
So it pains me to say this as a Carolina Panthers fan, but it was my Carolina Panthers coming in at 29 in total points. Honestly, I think the only reason why they were 29 and not 32 was because Taylor Moton was a top 5 tackle in total points. And so him being a stalwart on the right side, with having everybody else that left it, Cam Irving started the year at left tackle. They had guys like Pat Elflein, on the interior, John Miller along the interior, Matt Paradis in the interior. They had Sam Darnold running for his life early in the season. So they went through a total rehaul with this. And so they bring in Ike Ekwonu, to probably play left tackle, I would assume, being able to be the first offensive tackle on the board.
Would they move Moton? I think that's got to be the vision. Keep Moton where he's been so good and bring in Ekwonu on the left side, right?
Yeah, last year I think in training camp they tried Moton out at left tackle, but I'm always on the point where, if it's not, broken, don't try and fix it. And so if he's playing that well at right tackle, keep him there. Let's try and figure out the left tackle spot. And then they bring in Bradley Bozeman, who will probably end up playing center for this team. And then they bring in Austin Corbett from the Rams, who we talked about a little bit as well, being that kind of pass protecting guard on the right side. I would assume that they're probably going to go Brady Christensen at left guard, give him a shot. They drafted him in the 3rd round. They like him at guard and tackle. I think they see him as kind of a swing. They didn't give him a lot of chances at left tackle last year when they kind of needed it. And so I would assume that he's going to play guard. So they made it a priority to try and retool this offensive line. And so we'll see if Sam Darnold can have a little bit of success. Maybe they turn to Matt Corral at some point in the year, but this offensive line is going to be kind of the key to success for whatever quarterback they end up putting back there.
Yeah, I love that they really addressed that position. I think the guys you mentioned that they brought in, Corbett being, the leading total points player that they brought in, and Bozeman right there with him, all of a sudden, just like we talked about how the Bucs are kind of were scrambling. They made that trade for Shaq Mason, fill those guard positions. The ability to set that pocket. I mean, I can't tell you how many studies we've done and different ways that we've looked at it. When the interior of the offensive line gets upset, that's a really difficult thing to play quarterback behind.
Mm-hmm.
So Darnold, I know at this point not making anybody excited. Corral, hopefully, right? We'll see though. But at least give one of those guys a chance by putting the offensive line. So if Icky can be what people think Icky can be, they've got the bookend set, and then they've got 2 of the 3 interior guys in free agency. I think it should be night and day. So then as a team, you're looking at feeling good about the offensive line, feeling good about really the entire defense, right?
Yeah. I think that the defense is what's kind of helped this team together for a little bit. It's kind of a big reason why they won the first 3 games of the season last year to start 3-0. They've got a lot of young guys. They're going to get J.C. Horn back off of almost like a redshirt year where he only played the first couple of games. They addressed the corner spot last year. They get another safety in there to kind of they're bringing Xavier Woods. They're going to kind of let Jeremy Chin kind of move back towards, kind of roaming the center of the field, kind of in the middle, let him make plays towards the line of scrimmage and kind of that middle area of the field. I think the defense is what's going to kind of keep this team in games. It's just going to come up to can the offense put points up on the board.
Definitely comes back to that. For your sake, I hope they can get it together. I always like the idea of building up front, though.
Yes, for sure.
All right. 3rd from the bottom, the 30th ranked team in total points last year was?
So it's going to be the New York Giants. And so this is kind of another team where they really made it a priority with the new coaching staff and new general manager to really try and rebuild this offensive line. And so you have former top 5 pick Andrew Thomas at left tackle, kind of graded out as a mid-tier player for us. And we'll see if he keeps taking strides. And we'll kind of even see where does he play. Kind of the talk of the offseason was what offensive tackle did they bring in? They bring in Evan Neal, who you wrote up for our draft guide and everything. And so I'm curious to kind of see what you would think. Where do you think Evan Neal plays on the right side because he's got the experience of it? Do you put him at left tackle because you draft him in the top 5, drop him in the top 10? And so they kind of do a total overhaul just like the Panthers did. They bring in Evan Neal, Mark Lewinsky, Max Garcia, and John Feliciano in free agency in the draft, and replacing basically kind of 4 for 4 Will Hernandez, Billy Price, Nate Solder, and Matt Skura. And so they're retooling, trying to move some pieces around, get a new offensive line in there just to see if they can kind of help out Daniel Jones in this critical year for his development. And so, but yeah, I'm curious to see what do you think Evan Neal is going to end up doing with this offensive line?
Well, first of all, yeah, let's start there with Evan Neal. Love Evan Neal. The upside is just through the roof with him. You mentioned he could play on the left side, he could play on the right side. I think that if Evan Neal is if he is given the opportunity to develop, because this is still a young player, right? He's played in 40 games, but he just had he's 3 years removed from high school. So he's a young player, and yet he's got so much. He's got a high floor and he's got a high ceiling. The floor is he could play any of these positions. He could be a solid starter. The ceiling is this guy could be a Hall of Fame type of left tackle. He's got that kind of physical stature. Like we talked about Orlando Brown before. He's got that physical stature with just a rare level of athleticism for a man that size. Not as powerful as an Orlando Brown, but damn near. And combining that with a real dancing bear, like we're talking about a guy with feet, with hands. And so for that reason, long term, I think he'd kind of, if you can develop him and if he can become what he can be, he's almost wasted if he's not a left tackle. But then I go back to, you got to have two left tackles in the modern NFL, really. Yeah. You have to have a left tackle on the left side. You got to have a left tackle on the right side. This is a passing league. So we're not going to complain. I really think whether it's Neal that goes in on the right side, that might make more sense just right off the bat because you've had Thomas play 2 years on the left side already. And you know that Neal can kind of do that. But also, if he comes in and the vision is to really make him that your left tackle for the next 10 years, then I think it's reasonable to ask Andrew Thomas to make that move. So I don't feel too strongly about who plays where. What I do feel strongly about is Evan Neal having the potential to be just an absolute stud for them. Love him getting them where they got him. And then Andrew Thomas, I'll point out, really developed as a pass blocker last year. He went from in 2020, he gave up 11 sacks on 572 pass snaps. In 2021, on 483 pass snaps, he gave up just 3 sacks. So we saw that come down. The blown blocks in the pass game specifically went from 39 in 2020 to just 12 in 2021. So he didn't become the best offensive lineman in the league overnight. I'm still not saying that. He's still kind of middle of the pack, slightly above average based on what he did in 2021. But that was coming off of a really bad year in 2020, especially from the pass blocking perspective, right? 3 total points pass blocking in 2020. 15 in 2021, going from being way below average to being an above average player in that phase when he was already a good player in the run blocking phase. So I think I could see them sorting out either way, but at the end of the day, I think you feel really good about having those 2 positions locked down. And then, in addition to that, you got a Glowinski who played pretty well last year, and you're kind of working on, like you said, rebuilding with the free agents that you bring in. Max Garcia, John Feliciano, trying to fit in the rest of that O-line. Really got out of hand with how bad things got there for the Giants for a little bit. But like the Panthers, I think at least we're seeing them making moves, recognize it, not building through the draft at that position, except for the Neal pick, but more doing it through free agency, at least in the short term.
Yeah, I think the difference between these 2 teams that we just talked about versus the next 2 that we'll talk about is they actually, I think, are identifying that it's an issue and they're doing something about it. Whereas the next 2, we're not seeing that much of a difference between what they've been trying to do in the offseason. So, I at least applaud both of these teams for trying to get new guys in there, get fresh blood in there, and try and do something different.
All right. Well, on that note, let's get to the second from the bottom offensive line in the league. Who do we have there, and what can you tell about how they're not addressing what needs to be addressed?
Yeah, so the Houston Texans are coming at second to last. Really, they kind of had, some graded out with some kind of middle of the road tackles. I think Titus Howard even played some guard last year, which I think he's going to move back out to right tackle, kind of a more natural fit. And Laramie Tunsil being a left tackle, obviously, he's a high regarded left tackle. He didn't have his best year last year. And so the interior of this group was not very good, which is why they addressed it in the first round with Kenyon Green in the top 15. And so at least they did that. But outside of that, they didn't draft any other offensive linemen in the draft this year. So I think they're going with more the kind of stopgap veteran guys to try and get some production out of there. And so very interested to see how this offensive line looks. And looking at this group as a whole, it's not great. They did draft Austin Deculus in the 6th round, I should say. this group isn't speaking to me really, and so I definitely think if the Texans are looking to have a good year, this offensive line is just really going to have to improve.
Yeah, I mean, we look at Tunsil and we understand he's obviously been a great player, a little bit of a down year, but you're not looking at that as of all the positions on the Texans roster, you're probably looking at that one last in terms of needing an upgrade. But then they seem to just have a different evaluation of Howard than you and I do, and I think a lot of people do. So I think it remains to be seen if he can be a high level right tackle or not. But I think you really said it. The interior group, I don't know. I like some things that the Texans did in the draft this year, but I have a really hard time getting on the same page with kind of what their big picture strategy is. Sometimes I just think maybe their evaluations of their roster is just different than the way that I evaluate their roster. That would, if they think that they're good at offensive line, that would explain things there. But, for me, it seems like they're going to be overmatched no matter who's playing quarterback for them unless they get that sorted out.
Yeah, I mean, I think me and you are on the same page with this. We love Derek Stingley, and I think drafting him in the top 5, I don't think is a big reach or anything. Although some people may have a different opinion, but
I think it's only an injury risk. There's no talent risk. Yeah,
exactly. And so this was a team where I think a lot of people thought why wouldn't they draft an offensive tackle at 3? And so the concerns I think were there. It's just just like you said, it looks like they're evaluating their roster more than a lot differently than the public is.
I'm never going to be arguing in favor of need-based drafting. Get the great player there.
Yeah,
I like that. It's an important position. Get players at important positions. Sure, that's important. It's hard to kind of make out the full philosophy. I will say they did seem to come together a bit as a team as the year went on last year. Maybe they're doing more than we're perceiving. All right, one more. We got to get to the bottom offensive line in the NFL last year. Who was OL number 32 by total points?
Circling back around to the NFC South, it's going to be the Atlanta Falcons. And so really this group on paper, you look at these guys, they're kind of littered with, high picks, first round picks, guys that are solid. They've got Jake Matthews, who's been a decent left tackle in the league for the last few years. Christian Lindstrom was one of the best guards, kind of coming out of the draft out of his year. And he's been okay, but really I think Caleb McGarry was not a good right tackle for them. And then the interior, they haven't been able to replace Alex Mack the last few years, and we'll see kind of how they do that. Jalen Mayfield's kind of struggled in his first season, kind of moving from a tackle position inside to guard. And so as a whole, this group wasn't good last year. Obviously, they're at the bottom, but I think the biggest thing that I take away from it is they didn't really bring in anybody to try and mix it up. They only brought in Jermaine Ifedi, and so he didn't rate very highly in our total points rankings. And so I'm a little I'm questioning, why not try and address this as much as they can. In the draft, they go with a receiver in the top 10. They go with some other players on defense. They get Desmond Ridder in there. They don't draft, they draft Justin Schaefer in the 6th round, and that's really it. And so the guard from Georgia. And so I'm just kind of sitting here like, why didn't they try and do something else to try and improve this line?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they came in, there was a roster that had a lot of holes. And I think when you look at having these offensive linemen that are, a bunch of them are first contract players still, like you mentioned, Mayfield, Lindstrom, McGarry, these guys are cost controlled and they're probably thinking, let's try to make something out of them. Let's see what we have here. Let's see if we can get them to a point where we want to at least make them second contract players for us on the offensive line. They had a lot of other holes on the team to address too. When you look at the defense, the coverage pretty bare up the middle for them. And then Kyle Pitts obviously is a stud, right away in the NFL. But what are we doing with? Is it Marcus Mariota? Is it Ritter?
Is it?
So I think it's a case where they have a lot of holes to fill. They were probably in an unenviable position. It wasn't like they had a bunch of expensive old offensive linemen that they could just make cap casualties, eat it in 1 year, and then go back and go back to the well. They kind of had some guys that they're there. I do think Mayfield can improve a lot from his first year to his second year. He's a guy that I remember scouting when he came out of Michigan, and it was weird in the COVID year, him being a guy that came out. He's got all kinds of strength. I mean, this is a dude with grown man strength, and I think he has the upside to be a really good interior offensive lineman. He could play on the outside as well, but I think he's probably better suited on the interior at this point. But he was somebody who there was some rawness to his game. He needs some technical development. He's very football young. He's not a guy who had played 3 years and had 40 starts like Evan Neal. He was somebody who was in the teens in terms of the number of starts that he had. So, take your lumps with him. But, if something doesn't happen with McGarry, if something doesn't happen with Lindstrom soon, where these guys start to show out a little bit more, then you'll be looking at upgrading at all sorts of offensive line positions. I'm kind of with you. I wish they were doing more, but at least I understand that it can be hard to do it all at once when you've got a lot of different needs to fill on the roster.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like the coaching staff and the front office, they're kind of in unison where they know that they know that their team might not be very good this year. So let's just try and get good players. Let's be true to our draft boards, things like that. And they know that they're going to have time. And so this might be another team that's drafted inside the top 5, top 10 this upcoming year. And so maybe they do it next year, but I think they both
sensible
know
timeline, honestly.
Yeah. I think they know that they're going to have some more cracks at the bat at this. So,
and some really good players on the team now. AJ Terrell's been showing out for a couple years now, for sure. Talk about the sort of receiver group, if you include Kyle Pitts in there, the different sort of basketball team that they have between London, Ridley, and Pitts. They're pretty exciting from that perspective. Yeah, up front, up the middle, quarterback position. That's where they'll need to get better. They're working outside in, clearly, based on the way they're building things. So not unreasonable in the modern NFL. All right. That takes us through the top offensive lines and the bottom offensive lines. Let's talk about some of the teams that had key losses and additions, some teams that maybe we should zero in on that might have offensive lines that look especially different. We already talked about the Rams and the Bucs. What can you tell us about one of the other Super Bowl participant along with the Rams, the Cincinnati Bengals?
So, yeah, the Bengals, looking at, in terms of total points, Quentin Spain, Trey Hopkins, and Riley Reif, guys that they replaced this offseason, they didn't play terrible last season. Now, obviously, they're a big part of getting to the Super Bowl, but Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are kind of what make that team go. And so I think, going into the draft last year was, the big discussion was, do they take Penei Sewell to try and protect Joe Burrow? Do they, take Jamar Chase, his favorite receiver from LSU? Obviously, I don't think anybody's going to refute the pick that they made now, seeing it after year one. But they did obviously think that they needed to go out and try and retool the offensive line. So you bring in Lyle Collins from the Cowboys to plug in at right tackle. You bring in Alex Kappa to play along the interior, along with Ted Karras in free agency. And so, both of those guys graded out well over in total points. And so inserting those guys, kind of just a 3-for-3 swap. Their second round pick last year, Jackson Carman, sounds like he should be plugged into the left guard spot. And so we'll kind of see how this offensive line looks going into next year. We'll see, that division is going to be pretty tough going into it with the Browns looking ahead and the Ravens kind of, going through that crazy year last year with all the injuries. And so the Steelers might be, take a step back. And so where does this team kind of fit in the division? I think they obviously knew that the offensive line was something that they need to improve upon. And so I think they're plus additions. I think you would rather take all 3 of those guys over the 3 that they replaced. So I think this is a good offseason so far for the Bengals.
Yeah, we mentioned some guys coming over, right? You talk about coming from really good offensive lines, Karras, Kappa, and Collins. So maybe a little bit of a sort of just total change the way that the Chiefs did it the year before is kind of the intention there. Just really, really changing out everything, really changing the whole culture of the offensive line room along with that. I don't know if those players are huge upgrades per se compared to where they were at. And actually, just bringing up Lyle Collins made me think, because we mentioned the Bucs and we mentioned the Patriots as top 5 teams. We didn't mention the Cowboys. I mean, the Cowboys seem to always be a team that has a really good offensive line from year to year. And another team that popped into my head as I was thinking about that was the Chargers. The Chargers have a really interesting offensive line, having kind of like built up with Rashawn Slater and Corey Linsley last year. Not too differently from the way that the Chiefs did through kind of the draft and free agency. They get Zion Johnson this year. He'll probably slot in at right guard across from Matt Filer, who's been playing left guard with them for a while now. So they're a kind of interesting offensive line too. So maybe honorable mention, I wanted to shout those 2 out. We like those 2. Anybody else we should be mentioning? I'm trying to think off the top.
I think the Colts, are interesting.
Absolutely. Three awesome offensive linemen.
Exactly.
On their team. What are they doing at left tackle though?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing with them is trying to figure out who's going to protect the blind side, like you said. And so they draft Bernard Raymond, who was a highly regarded player coming out of Central Michigan this year. maybe he steps in, the third round pick at left tackle. They do have Matt Pryor, who played a little bit there last year. They brought in Dennis Kelly, who's been kind of like a journeyman swing tackle who's played both
They seem
spots.
to just have dudes like on reserve. They just roll out more bodies at that position, right? Like,
yeah. So, I mean, it could just be kind of like an open competition. And so we'll see how it is. They did lose Mark Lewinsky to the Giants this offseason that we talked about a little bit. So they kind of have a little bit of a hole to fill there. I think they're comfortable with Danny Pinter at right guard, though. So, but I mean, year in, year out, we think the Colts are kind of one of the top offensive lines because they've got 3 franchise players at their position. So with Braden Smith, Ryan Kelly at center, and then obviously Quentin Nelson.
Yeah. And while we're at it, I'll shout the Saints, another team that deserves mentioning. They lose Teron Armstead, who we will talk about momentarily, but they replace him with Trevor Penning. Obviously, they made the trades to get 2 first-round picks with Olave and Penning this year, but Penning comes in and he slots in next to a pretty formidable offensive line when you talk about Pete, McCoy, Ruiz, and Ramczyk. They've been good for a while, and who knows when we talk about Armstead if he'll be healthy. But let's talk about the team where he's going, because they've also changed their offensive line, and they are decidedly not a team that we would talk about anywhere near the top offensive line list.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things we tweeted out a stat of this when they signed Teron Armstead. Both their tackles last year, Liam Eichenberg and Jesse Davis, were in the bottom 10 in blown blocks in 2021. And Liam Eichenberg led the NFL with the most at 48 blown blocks last season. And so
a dubious distinction for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, so obviously they come in and with the new head coaching staff and front office, they go out and they make one of the biggest kind of splashes in free agency, bringing in one of the best left tackles, the last handful of seasons with Teron Armstead. And so he didn't play a lot last year. So it's kind of get a good gauge of what he looked like last season. I think, you take that trade every day if you're going to lose Jesse Davis and you're going to bring in Teron Armstead. And so they're another team that might do some kind of musical chairs with the rest of the offensive line. Who do they play at right tackle? It seems like they brought in Connor Williams as well. It seems like he'll slot into the left guard spot. Michael Dieter was a good center for them. And so really figuring out who's going to be the blindside protector for Tua next year. And so is that
right, the right tackle blindside protector?
Yeah. Is it going to be Eichenberg? Is it going to be Austin Jackson? Who is that going to be? So Teron Armstead, I mean, he's one of the best left tackles in the league. And so with this new offense, with Mike McDaniel coming in, more of that zone scheme, like the Shanahan tree, that's what he's best at, getting on the move, sealing off the backside plays. He's one of the smartest and kind of, and the smartest and most athletic kind of left tackles in the league.
And I wonder, you could see a scenario where they put him on the right side and had that other smorgasbord of players kind of competing for the left side, given that Tua is left-handed. I don't know. But yeah, Connor Williams, I think, is one not to sleep on. Probably, just as big an addition to the offensive line, considering he really solidifies things, right? If you think those two guys are going to play on the left side, then you mentioned Michael Dieter at center along with them. And then you kind of look at the competition. They've had, Robert Hunt performed pretty well. Solomon Kinley was another guy that they drafted a few years ago along with him. Those guys can compete at that right guard spot. And then I think at right tackle, you'd be talking about Eichenberg and an Austin Jackson potentially. Although Jackson was playing left guard last time we saw him. He's probably been supplanted by Connor Williams at that position. Does that mean that he moves back out to tackle? Is it that he and Eichenberg are competing at left tackle? We'll see about that. What's got to be frustrating for the Dolphins is similar to the Falcons. They invested in the offensive linemen in drafting these guys, and they just haven't seen the returns because Eichenberg, Jackson, Hunt, Kinley, you maybe have like one solid starter out of the 4 of those guys that you spent a lot of draft capital on in the last couple of years. So hopefully Mike McDaniel's offense can kind of make the sum of the parts greater than what the individuals have been to this point. Competition never hurt anybody, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm very interested to see, because I was a big Eichenberg fan coming out of Notre Dame, and so to see him struggle that much last year was really shocking to me.
It's also a first-year offensive lineman. We saw with Andrew Thomas, and we saw him get a little bit better. This is a very hard position to play in the NFL against these freak defensive linemen. So maybe it is a matter of just getting some development in there. Give him credit. I mean, he didn't ask out. He played basically the whole season for them. We shall see. And he was next to that aforementioned Austin Jackson, which maybe didn't help. All right, under the radar lines for 2022. Before we get out of here, what do you have as far as who we should be keeping an eye on that might be a little bit better than where they were last year, or what people might think of them?
So one team I kind of want to hit on was that came out just based off of total points was the Detroit Lions. They were 14th, so they were in kind of that above average spot with all 32 teams in the league. And so, but I think the big thing is we kind of talked about with the Eagles and the Chiefs is the continuity between returning all five starters. And so they drafted Penei Sewell last year in the top 10. They've got Taylor Decker at left tackle. They've got Jonah Jackson at left guard. They've got Vaitai at right guard. And then you've got the center slipping my mind. So
Ragnow.
Yeah, Ragnow at center. So yeah, they bring all five starters back at that spot. And with that being kind of a young team, a team that I think the offensive line kind of fits the character and kind of the personality of who their head coach is with Campbell and everything like that. So I think this is a team that could take another step as an offensive line, just because if they get better, who knows, we might see a decent year out of Jared Goff. They've got a lot of young receivers and running backs with DeAndre Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown and those guys. And so I think this could be a team that maybe they win a couple more games, and it really could just be based off of this offensive line.
Yeah, this is a team that doesn't shy away from doing some more of that gap stuff. They're exactly what their head coach he's in their image. They are a tough team. Pretty interesting when you look at Penei Sewell being added to their offensive line. All of their offensive linemen were above average last year. He was actually the lowest performer out of the five of them. Decker, Jackson, Ragnow, Vaitai, and then Sewell there. So pretty interesting when you look at that. The trajectory is looking pretty good for him. And this could really be a team that bludgeons some people and also now has some more weapons on the outside. When you look at St. Brown played so well as a rookie last year, and Jamison Williams, if he can come back mid-season and provide some of the spark, I mean, you see pretty much every ingredient to a good offense except, figuring out that quarterback position.
Yeah. I think it's really kind of admirable with Penei Sewell, him taking the year off with the COVID year, and he switched positions, and he's still graded out as a pretty good rookie. I think is really cool. So I think the sky is kind of the limit for him.
Yeah, sky's the limit. If there's any part like the weakest part of your line has the biggest arrow up in the future, that's always a good sign.
Yeah, for sure.
Who else do we got? Let's keep it in the NFC North.
The Green Bay Packers, for sure, are one of the more notable teams. The fact that they still finish in the top 10 in total points, and David Bakhtiari, I think, only played one game last year. Elton Jenkins missed the majority of the year as well. Both of those guys, kind of their stalwarts on the left side of the line. They're going to get those guys back. They lose a couple of pieces. Billy Turner, who's kind of been kind of a stopgap right tackle, who's played some guard for them. They lose him in free agency. Basically, they have some of these versatile interior offensive linemen, Royce Newman, John Runyon, Sean Ryan. They drafted Zach Tom this year as well. And so they kind of have these guys that have played multiple spots, in college and in the NFL so far. And so seeing how they kind of piece together the rest of this offensive line with those two guys on the left, and the fact that they were so good last year without him, I think is really notable.
Yeah, both of them were studs. At first, Bakhtiari gets injured. Jenkins moves out and starts playing at tackle. And there's really not much drop off. And then you lose him. And he sort of had a little bit of a comeback at the end of the year with Bakhtiari. But when you look at those two guys being healthy, all of a sudden you're way above average there on the left side of the line right away. And the only real question when you look at Myers and Newman is filling in for Billy Turner at right tackle. I am a noted non-Billy Turner enthusiast. In terms of being able to fill that, being able to see who's going to slot in there, is it a Zach Tom? Like, we'll see exactly what they want to do there. This is an offensive line that they had to make it without their dudes last year, and they actually made it through pretty well. I think this is a team that could be a lot, better offensively and not having to rely on just Rodgers being special in order to do some things. Now, you lose Devontae Adams along with that, and that makes things a little bit different. So we'll see if they can handle that aspect of the personnel changes. But at least from the offensive line perspective, things are looking up compared to where they were last year.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of kind of how their defense looks too, because I was a big Rashawn Gary fan coming out of college. I'm a big Quay Walker fan. I just wrote him up this year for our NFL draft website. I think he's going to be a great player, and they add in Devontae Wyatt too. So the offensive line and the defense is really the identity of this team with obviously Aaron Rodgers at the helm. So, but yeah, obviously trying to replace Devontae Adams is going to be the biggest thing for them.
Last but not least, or maybe least, let's switch it over and let's talk about one last team that's under the radar. Who do we got?
So I wasn't going to bring him in, but they they're a little notable because they're obviously a big market team. But yeah, the New York Jets, they were actually their fifth ranked lowest in terms of total points for the O-line position. But they did make a couple of moves, and I just think they're notable because I think, them playing a little bit of musical chairs with this. I think they got some good production last year out of first rounder Elijah Vera Tucker. I think the biggest question with him though is Mekhi Becton. He obviously missed the majority of last year. He was a top 15 pick, coming in at left tackle. He's played well when he has played, but I think there's some rift between him and the coaching staff and the front office. I think loves him because Joe Douglas drafted him, but the new coaching staff isn't necessarily a fan. George Fant stepped in at left tackle and played really well for them last year. And so I talked with our resident Jets expert, Alec Mallon, and he said he thinks George Fant is going to play at left tackle and Mekhi Becton is going to play at right. And so I'm very interested to see how that plays out. They also bring in one of the better guards in the league in Laken Tomlinson, who came over from the 49ers, who's played really well for them over the last few years. And so
in the system, he's played well in this same system.
Yep, exactly. And so I think there was some confusion with him coming over. They thought Elijah Vera Tucker was still going to be a left guard and he would have to change positions. But I'd rather have the formidable, the guy who's already been playing at that position well. And so I think as a whole group, this offensive line can be really good. It's just kind of depends on what's going to happen with Mekhi Becton and who do they play and at what position.
Definitely making things over, right? No more Morgan Monis, no more Duvernay Tardif. I think you're probably right. I would trust Alec and what he has to say there with Fant on the left and probably Becton on the right. Maybe Becton's skill set is even a little bit more enhanced on the right side there with just the kind of power that he can play with and how that fits in with that sort of an offense. And then at least you are feeling good about the guards at this point, right? Between Tomlinson and AVT, feel pretty good about that position. McGovern at center, I think, is fine. Figuring out those tackles, that's obviously going to be a big part of it for them. They've quietly been putting together a pretty interesting offensive supporting cast. Like we say with most teams, we'll see how the quarterback can fit into that because I don't know if I'm buying the Zach Wilson stock, even if they do sort out the offensive line around him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very intrigued with this team. They bring in Garrett Wilson, they bring in Breece Hall. They've got 3 tight ends that they brought in with Uzama and Rucker and Conklin. They've got the supporting cast. They've got some pieces on the offensive line. And so I think it's going to be up to how does the development of Zach Wilson play out. And so that's what's going to make or break, I think, this team. And maybe they're not making the playoffs this year, especially with the Bills and the Dolphins seem to be a good – and that whole division is going to be tough. And so – but I think in terms of just the true trajectory of this this whole team, I think this is a big year for Zach Wilson.
I think if I was like a fantasy keeper league guy, Elijah Moore might be one of the players that I'd have my eye on in terms of he's so good. I think that they just need to unlock him in a lot of ways. He was everything as a rookie that I thought he could be, and then some. And if it is the quarterback that's holding him back, then he's got even that much more that he could do. So I get excited about him. If it doesn't work out for him this year, it'll definitely work out for him next year, I think, because he's explosive. He's hard to reel in.
Yeah, exactly. I think this receiving core with Wilson, Davis, and Moore, this is all on Zach Wilson, I think.
All right, I learned a lot from Mark Simon. One thing that I learned from him specifically was to always make sure I give a quick recap and some of the signposts of what we just talked about. So, as a reminder, the top 5, number 5, the Eagles, number 4, the Patriots, number 3, the Chiefs, number 2, the Rams, number 1, the Buccaneers. But watch out because the Bucs and the Rams had a lot of musical chairs up front this year. On the bottom 4 lines, we had the Panthers, the Giants, the Texans, and the Falcons. Were last in total points on the offensive line last year. Watch out for the Bengals additions. Look out for the Dolphins making some changes. And in terms of the under radar teams, we had the Lions, the Packers, and what's going on with the Jets. Jordan, it was awesome talking O-line with you. I could obviously do this all day with you and I hope to do it again soon.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
The NFL draft has come and gone, but we're just getting a sense of how the players that were drafted are going to fit into their new teams and how all the undrafted free agents are also going to complicate those depth charts. So you can find out all that and more by going back to that same draft website, nfldraft.sportsinfosolutions.com. There you'll see all of the updated information from the NFL draft on the site. It was on there instantaneously as the draft was happening. So you can see who the teams landed. You can check out all of the scouting reports and analytics for each of the players that were added by your team. You'll want to check out the team page for whatever your favorite NFL team is. It's on nfldraft.sportsinfosolutions.com. Click there and don't miss the Sonar depth chart. The Sonar depth chart is really the backbone of this whole conversation that Jordan and I are having, where we're able to visualize the strength of each position on the roster, how well these players performed last year, what we can expect in terms of slotting in rookies, slotting in free agents, and look at the updated depth charts for where these teams are looking as we look forward now to the 2022 season with all new rosters. So check it out, nfldraft.sportsinfosolutions.com. You've got everything from the SIS Sonar depth charts, leaderboards, big board, everything you can imagine right there. Check it out. For Jordan Edwards, Justin Stein, and the rest of the SIS football crew, I am Matt Manocherian, and thank you for listening to the Off the Charts Football Podcast.